Okay, if you just want to wait 10 seconds. Okay, go.
Croeso bawb, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this Wellbeing in Nature live panel presentation and discussion. My name is Amy Andrews and I'm the manager for Coed Lleol, Smallwoods, Wales. As an organisation, we're passionate about the management of woodlands for people, wildlife, community and economy. We're also committed to working with the health and environment sector to increase health and wellbeing opportunities and social prescribing to the outdoors, alongside developing training and encouraging research. We aim to be dynamic and adaptive at working in partnership with others to increase opportunities for woodland and wellbeing activities in both rural and urban settings. So please do get in touch with us if you have any suggestions or ideas about how we could work in partnership. I'd also like to thank our funders, Natural Resources Wales, who've been funding our work for the last 10 years, the Healthy and Active Fund, and also the AONBs on Anglesey and the Clwydian and Dee Valley Range, as well as LEADER. I'd now like to introduce the panel and thank them all very much for joining us. We welcome Rob Penn, best-selling author and broadcaster, Rod Waterfield, founder of the award-winning Woodland Skills Centre, Ed Lord, mental health nurse and specialist in ecotherapy research, and Natasha Simons, Coed Lleol's Research and Evaluation Officer. And last, but by no means least, we welcome Jennifer Davies from Public Health Wales, a senior public health specialist who has worked in the NHS, academia, local authority and independent sector over the last 25 years. Her focus prior to COVID was on the wider determinants of health, mental health and well-being and the application of behavioural science to influence change at a population level. And finally, I'd like to thank Sabine Soosten, mindfulness practitioner, who will be sharing with us a short meditation of the tree to close the discussion. I'll now be turning off my camera to carry out the technical side and field the questions you may have. So please do send us your questions. And I'm now delighted to hand over to Rob Penn.
Thanks, Amy. Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Robert Penn. I'm an author and a broadcaster. I'm also a woodsman. I own a small wood here in the Black Mountains, and I help run a local community woodland group, which I've been involved in for well over a decade. I've been interested in the subject of nature and well-being for nearly 2 decades, principally through personal experience at first. I have used the natural world, and more specifically trees, as both curative and preventative forms of medicine to deal with grief and to counter depression. I'm no expert though, and happily today we are joined by people who are, and I'll introduce them in a moment. One of the first and best known studies in the realm of environmental psychology was conducted by Richard S. Ulrich over 30 years ago now. And he concluded then that patients recovering from surgery in rooms with a window facing nature took less medicine for pain relief than patients with a window facing a brick wall. That's a huge oversimplification of the study, but it has had significant consequences which still echo today. Since then, an impressive shelf of research has accumulated that says that spending time in nature improves cognition, helps with anxiety and depression, and even enhances human empathy. As I'm sure many of you know, the practice of Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing in Japan, essentially going for a stroll in an ancient forest, a practice inspired by Shinto and Buddhist religions, is now established as a standard modern preventative form of medicine in Japan. The widespread nature of the practice has led to a bona fide field of study trying to understand not just why walking in a fragrant old growth forest is good for us, but also how the magic of trees works on us as humans at a molecular level in our cells and neurons. And the research data that comes out of Japan is compelling. Leisurely forest walks reduce heart rate and blood pressure, decrease sympathetic nerve activity, and lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol. A remarkable array of benefits for a walk in the woods. To walk into a woodland, one is often overcome by a hair-raising transcendent sense that is as common as it is precious. I have come to understand over years that this feeling is the spirit of all the people who have ever known that wood. It is a force representing the continuity in the intense and mutually beneficial relationship between people and the natural world that has accumulated over ages. It is also a siren song to the oldest and deepest connection to the land and nature that we humans have. We would be mad to ignore that feeling today. Through the work of our panelists and organizations like Coed Lleol that Amy introduced at the beginning, nature and well-being has risen in public consciousness in the United Kingdom in recent years. And that direction of travel received what might be seen as an extraordinary boost during lockdown, when many more people began to notice details in the natural world and appreciate how they felt about them in an amplified way. This then feels like a landmark moment, a time to effect change. Now, nature and well-being is a huge subject, and we plan to cover as much ground as we can. So what I'm going to do now is introduce the panelists who will all speak for a few minutes, each on their particular field and experience. And then there will be a panel discussion with your questions. So first of all, handing over to Rod. Good morning, Rod. Rod, you're on mute. There we go. Rod's still on mute.
Can you hear me now? Okay, if my voice is not coming through, perhaps one of the other panelists will do something. My name's Rod Waterfield, and I manage a place called the Woodland Skills Centre, which is in Denbighshire, right in the heart of the Coed Lleol Range AOMB. It's a 50-acre site, mainly woodland. The land is owned by a family trust, and their management objectives for the woodland have always been social, environmental, and economic. And that's not 1, 2, 3, that's 1, 1, 1. And the family trust invited the Woodland Skills Centre to set up on the land so that they could fulfill the social aspect, the social management objective. And the Woodland Skills Centre, and that's the 2 timber frame buildings in the foreground of that picture, started off by running courses in traditional crafts, woodland management, lots of countryside management. It went to art, craft, music, poetry, horticulture, mindfulness, all sorts of things. And it's a big program. It runs on nearly 90 courses a year. But, if we have a strapline as an organisation, it's who don't we see? And typically on a Saturday morning, when I sit down to greet people who are coming to learn how to make a chair or something like that, the people who are sat in the room are white, middle class, educated, in work with disposable income or retired with disposable time. And it's lovely to have them, but they are not representative of the whole community. So the second thing that we started was looking at children and families, because they weren't represented on the courses. Thank you, Amy. We did forest school, we did holiday club, and holiday club's great fun, that picture on the left there. But I've got to say, that these are privileged children. Their parents know we do Holiday Club. They go on the internet and book them in. They get them up in the morning, they get them dressed, and they bring them to us, and they collect them at the end of the day. And it's great fun, and we love doing it. But we have to ask the question, are they representative of the total community? And that's led us on to the third section of what we do, which is the social prescribing. We work with a number of agencies. We work with social services, with education, with charities such as Mind, and with Coed Lleol and all sorts of people. And pre-COVID, we were running about 10 groups a week. The people on the screen now is actually a walking group that we support in Wrexham for Coed Lleol. And it's mostly fairly elderly people, a lot of whom are recovering from illness. And we go for a gentle walk every Wednesday afternoon and finish up with a cup of tea in the car park wherever we started from. And obviously that's been in abeyance through the summer, but we're actually starting up again this coming week, which is really exciting. We're having to restrict the groups. We're having to choose good locations for them. But it's really nice that we're able to start that up again. This picture is actually in one of our centre buildings. It's made out of wood. That shouldn't be a surprise to people. And it was made by people on a course here. And it's very high energy performance. The insulation is sheep's wool. And the plaster is lime, all from Wales, the sheep's wool and the lime and the timber and everything. But in addition to that, we have long-running contracts. If I could have the next slide, please, Amy. We have long-running contracts with social services working with adults with complex disabilities, and 2 days a week, about to become more than that. We have a big workshop space because in terms of the benefits for people who come here, partly it's a social experience because a lot of these people live on their own or in sheltered accommodation. So it's partly the social experience. It's partly being outdoors in the natural environment within the woodland or the allotments or the orchards or whatever. And partly it's purposeful activity. We feel very strongly that people's mental health is affected not just by being outdoors, but those moments in the day when you step back and you say, wow, look what I've done. It might have been, I've cooked a meal, I've done the shopping. But we want to provide opportunities for people who come to us to do things that make them feel pleased about themselves. And this group was making some picnic tables for our forest school sites in the woodland. And then the next slide. Actually a bit out of date actually, because we have 17 allotments that are rented out to members of the community, but also 2 of the allotments are worked by these adults with complex disabilities. And in fact, when I say that slide is out of date, we had a very welcome funding from the National Botanic Garden of Wales. We're a regional hub for them. And we've completely redone the allotment with a polytunnel and a new shed and everything else. So we started with the courses, all sort of outdoor woodland related, saw we weren't relating with children and moved on to the children's schools, and then realized that actually there were lots of other people within our community who would really benefit from being in the outdoors, being with us, enjoying the social experience, enjoying the outdoors. And at the moment, we work with education, with youngsters who've been excluded from school. We work with young adults with autism. We work with Mind. We work with adults with dementia, as well as these community support groups. And it's really rewarding. We love it. We have an amazing team of staff, and we love what we do, and we think it genuinely has a positive impact on all the people we connect with. Okay.
Terrific, Rod. Thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating. Every aspect of what you're doing, and exemplary in many ways. And interesting also, you know, about representation. I'm sure that's something that we'll talk a bit about when we have a panel discussion. And great to hear that activities are beginning again post-lockdown. That's fantastic. So next, Ed Lord. So just to remind you, Ed is a mental health nurse and a specialist in ecotherapy. Morning, Ed.
Hi, my name's Ed, as Rob just introduced. Thank you very much. So I've been a mental health nurse for over 15 years. I worked in the NHS for over 10 years. I'm a lecturer in mental health nursing at Swansea University now, and I've also conducted research into ecotherapy, nature-based interventions for health and well-being. For this introduction here, I'm going to give you two stories, or a few stories based on two images. Can we bring my first image up? Cool, yeah. I think these two images and the stories can help to express what I'm sharing about green recovery and health and nature. Our worlds are made up of stories, and they help us to understand things that are complex and contested. Stories hit the spots that other methods and mediums miss. And in a way, I think that's exactly what nature-based interventions for health can do. They can hit those complex spots that other things miss. My first image is of an acute hospital with a river running through. This is where I started my nursing career. This is the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham. I trained here and I worked here for quite a few years on an acute psychiatric ward. The river was kind of an aside. It wasn't of interest to the acute hospital, I wouldn't say. It was something to be managed, something that went past, something that could have been a risk, shall we say. But it was something that was used by patients, by service users, by staff, and it benefited people's well-being. You would always find small groups of people hanging around here. I would often go for walks with people from the ward, and we would end up down by the river and we would chat. We would watch the water flowing by. You would fiddle around with the grass. It would be quite a therapeutic space to hang around in. But like I say, that wasn't intended in the hospital plan. Quite a lot of it was in a culvert running past. Let's get it out of the way. Let's not see it. Let's not make it a core part of what we do. And I take a few things from that. So the use of the river was informal. It wasn't facilitated in any kind of way. It was used by staff and by service users. Everyone was getting something out of it. And on the surface, it had risks. As I've already said, if I was risk assessing that on the ward, I would have thought, oh no, someone's going to fall in it. I'm going to fall in it. Something bad's going to happen. But actually, that's forgetting the inherent risks that an acute hospital has within it, the iatrogenic harm that some of our interventions potentially could cause. And actually thinking about cost benefit analysis, something like that could be very beneficial. And I also think it can zoom us in and zoom us out. Much of the emphasis of healthcare now needs to be on prevention and on population health. And my colleague from Public Health Wales will no doubt expand on this a bit later. So ever since the 1986 Ottawa Charter from the World Health Organization, health services have meant to be putting prevention on an equal footing to treatment. But this is something that, even though it's embedded in policy, we can never quite realize. We're still wedded to this model of acute care and dealing with illness and this kind of thing. And actually, if we're going to achieve this idea of prevention and population health, we need to be able to think about the individual, but we also need to be able to think about the social And thinking about population, how do you get population health into your head? How do you think about that? And the river flowing past the hospital can illustrate that. This is happening on the sub-individual level. Someone's there, they're having benefit to their microbiome, their immune system, their cognitive state, the research that tells us about attention restoration, that tells us about stress reduction. They're having an individual effect, their subjective well-being. This could be part of their story and part of their narrative and how they seek health. But also this can affect us on a societal level, thinking about the social determinants of health. Who hasn't got a green space near their house when they go home? Who can access this and who can't? Who do we think it's safe for and who isn't it safe for? Who's the path level for and who is it not? Can we get through the gate? Can we get off the ward? What barriers are there to being there? And that can also bring in this idea of the bio, the psycho, and the social, this idea that we're biological, we're psychological, and we're social, and all these things can be met at once. And the river is hitting the spot. It's hitting that spot that acute healthcare can't get to. And that's exactly what nature-based health interventions can do. They can hit that spot. My research over the past few years has been of a qualitative, critical, sociological kind of approach. I've built on the large body of research that's available looking at the health and wellbeing benefits of nature and human health. Only this month, a new meta-analysis of Shinrin-yoku came out from Derby Uni, I think it was. And there's a lot of data around, there's a lot of information, we can see these things. But the critical sociological analysis and the things that I've been doing tell us that we need to work out how this fits into the policy and the service ecosystem. The fact that we even call policies and services ecosystems kind of shows a lot of the problem, I think. We need to get back to what ecosystems really are. And we need to think how nature-based interventions are fitting within these things. Do you want to flick on to my next picture? So it's a challenge to look at services and to think how this thing fits, and the services need to change as much as the intervention needs to change to fit the service. And that's what a green recovery can be all about. So my final picture, that's me playing with my kids in the shadow of the Berlin Wall. When I was their age, I would have got shot playing there. And that shows how places can change, how our perceptions of places can change, and things that don't necessarily seem therapeutic or like doesn't seem like a good idea to be doing or seems risky. Actually, with a bit of reframing and with a bit of micro, a bit of macro, changing political systems, changing contexts, changing personal volition, we can come together and we can play in a space that would have been full of risks not all that long ago. And I think the nature and health thing and thinking about a green recovery is all about reframing those things and coming to that point where we can all play together and work on those social determinants of health and the kind of population health that we need to be hitting. So thank you.
Fascinating, Ed. Thank you so much. I mean, it just gives some insight into the complex nature of the subject. And I'm sure that you'll be very useful when we're having a panel discussion, particularly trying to focus on how we might be able to use nature and health in a green recovery. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Next, Jennifer Davis. Jennifer is Public Health Officer with responsibility for the Swansea Bay. Jennifer, good morning.
Thank you for that. And that was a really good segue, actually, from hearing both from Rod and Ed. It's great to hear the work that you're involved with. And I think hopefully what I'm now doing is just sort of looking at it from the perspective, as we've already started to talk about, which is about population level, which is really where I focus, and the inequalities piece. If you can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And I think what we've already touched on, actually, is that green space means different things. It looks different to different people. I started my life in West Wales, farming, as part of a farming family, and I had the pleasure of growing up in a very green environment. But increasingly through my lifespan, I've ended up spending a lot of my time in very densely populated urban areas, and I think that probably mirrors a lot of people's experiences, and maybe many haven't even had the benefit of being brought up and spending time in green space. But I can certainly testify to what we already know, probably of those who are on the panel and those who maybe are tuning in, how important that is to how we feel as individuals, and certainly we see it at a population level, that is absolutely the case. And we have this innate connectivity that we all know spending time in or being able to see greenery, greening and green spaces is really good for us. And I guess that's why we actually try and bring that into our urban spaces. So often, you know, we have our own sort of little back garden, maybe, if we're lucky enough. And I think most of us who've been through this lockdown have really benefited from any green space that we're able to see or to spend time in. And I guess what I would say in terms of thinking about it from a recovery perspective and thinking about it from well-being, and well-being, as we know, in Wales, we're very fortunate. We have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and that shines a real light on the different elements that contribute to overall well-being, which is slightly different from health. We tend to overfocus when we talk about health in terms of presence or absence of conditions, physical or mental, but I think we all know that well-being, when it's measured subjectively, is a combination of different things that mean different elements to us. And certainly from a population perspective, we're looking at it through the elements of the economic, sustainability, cultural, and so on. And I think the green space offers a huge amount into all of those areas. If you could go on to the next slide for me. Thank you. And I think, I mean, some of you, if not all of you, will have probably come across many different conceptual frameworks. And these are just two. And the one on the left, I think, is the one that Ed was just referring to, which is what we call the determinants of health and well-being. And what it tries to do is really show that there are a complex range of different factors that influence populations and communities' health and well-being. And that's what that tries to demonstrate, that interconnectivity, and that includes our built and our natural environment, as well as our social environment. And I guess what's important with part of that is that, you know, what we're seeing is that the environment is something that influences us directly. It influences our behaviors. It creates a context within which we live our lives, whether we thrive or survive. But equally, we're not passive in that. So we as individuals and as communities also influence our environment directly or indirectly. And the diagram on the right-hand side really tries to bring that out. That's actually directly taken out of the Future Generations Commissioner report around the role of planning and how we plan and create our spaces, that actually, you know, the importance that that brings to our lives, and how much we need to be mindful of that in terms of how we influence that, because that has that direct feedback into our own well-being. If you can, next slide, please. And I guess this is the bit that actually Rod and Ed have already very much focused on and tuned into, which is that health and well-being is felt and experienced differently across our populations. And whereas often it's called an inequality is often just describing that there is a difference. And this report through the World Health Organization, which was done with Public Health Wales at the end of last year, which is a European Health Equity Status report, and looks at, I think it was about 35, 36 different countries across Europe. What that shined a light on is that there is a health inequity, that there is an injustice to this, and that it demonstrates that there are 5, if you like, conditions that influence well-being, and whether it's and these bar charts, you'll see them for self-reported health or for mental well-being, and you'll see basically proportionately they're about the same. And one of the key contributors, as you can see, is the financial insecurity element. But very closely following are the living conditions, and within that is green space within that, as well as poor quality housing. So it demonstrates that actually health as an outcome or a status, an experienced element of our of how we feel about our lives. Only 10% of that is actually driven by our health services. So I think it just further shines a light on how important it is. A whole range of different aspects of our life contributes to our overall well-being. Next slide, please. So green spaces and health inequalities. We've already heard from others, and I'm sure we'll hear again from Natasha. We already know a huge amount about how important green spaces are, directly impacting in a very positive way on health outcomes. That includes self-rated health. It includes elements around body mass index, so obesity or overweight, mental health and well-being, and longevity in older people. And I think that's partly demonstrated through a range of different policies that are in existence. So I've taken a few images there to demonstrate. So putting health into place was the new Healthy Towns initiative in England, which again offered an opportunity where new towns were being created to really think about how do we plan and influence how this space is created, bearing in mind what we know about what makes a great place. So how do we measure that? And there are various other sort of initiatives. And the top left there is the place standard from Scotland. Scotland's done a lot of work around this. And what I like about that tool is it actually is driven from communities themselves determining what a great place is. Because I think it is about communities owning, being a custodian and recognising. And I'd like to think that one of the things that we've seen coming out of COVID is, as we've already reflected, how much time we've all spent in a very small area. For some who are shielding, it's been our own home and only our home. But for many, it's been a very small area outside of that. And I think it's really helped us see what's great about the areas that we live in, and really appreciating it that bit more, considering how busy our lives tend to be and take us away and our attention away from our local area. Next slide, please, which is my last, I believe. And I guess this is just hammering it home again, that access to green space is not equal across the population. We know that increasing the use of good quality green space for all is likely to reduce health inequalities, and that it's it's something that we all have a role to play. There is something that we can all bring as part of that, and the community voice can be heard wherever you live. There is a local authority that does its own planning of spaces, and that's a really great opportunity for populations to get far more involved in helping to determine what's protected, how much green space is seen, how that gets used, and how we then benefit from it. Because certainly what we are seeing is that actually there is an element of our living conditions and income-related inequality is less pronounced when people have access to green space. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Sorry, I was making a note there. Something very interesting that you said. That's fascinating, and again, I think leads to lots of ideas and thoughts that we might be able to try and cover in the panel discussion. But for now, Natasha. So Natasha Simons works for Active Woods. Well, she works on the Active Woods Wales programme for Coed Lleol in evaluation. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, Robert. Nice to see everyone. My name's Natasha Simons, and I coordinate the research and evaluation for Coed Lleol as an organisation as a whole. And today I'm going to talk to you about the organisation and how we've been measuring our impact through our evaluation process and how we've responded to the COVID-19 crisis as well. So I think the next slide will show you our areas that we cover through Wales. So as you can see through the stars here in different colours, we're covering quite a lot of Wales at the moment. thought this would be a nice opportunity to kind of highlight what we're doing here. The areas that I'm going to be talking to you today about are the areas in red, and that's our Active Woods Wales programme. And that programme's been running for about 10 years now, started in 2 areas and now have expanded to 8. But we've also got other programmes going on this year. So these are just the programmes that we're running this year. And some of those are research programmes. So we're doing pilots to try and network with GPs and referral organisations more effectively, to try and get social prescribing to outdoor health developed more fully in those areas. And that's particularly in the W biosphere area. But yeah, today I'm going to talk to you about the Active Woods, and I've got limited time, so I think we'll go on. I'll tell you a little bit what Active Woods is, because you might be thinking, what do we do? Well, what we do is we take people who often have been referred from other organisations like Mind or Flying Start. We're now working with families and other organisations and GP referrals as well. But we also take people that are self-referring into our organisation, and we give them experiences of woodland skills, arts and crafts. We might do some charcoal making, some green woodworking. We do some knowledge and understanding. We help them to identify trees, to identify woodland plants. We increase their knowledge of an understanding of the woods in particular. We do foraging activities. Outdoor cooking is a great highlight. Everyone enjoys the campfire and a cup of tea around the fire. And of course, you know, we're doing a lot of physical exercise through these activities. You might be doing those by stealth in a way, because you're moving and active and doing things while doing activities, but other things would be more directed. We do green gym up in Anglesey, which is a really popular activity. And of course, we've got woodland walks and some mindfulness. So we feel that we're covering lots of things in activities, and generally people come to us for a 4 to 6 week experience. And then they can then come to us every month from then on, because we offer monthly drop-in groups. We also do walking groups as well. So if we go on to the next slide, that just gives you a brief outline of what we're doing. And I really wanted to highlight who comes to our sessions, because I think this is quite important in the light of what we've been talking about today. So when we've done the evaluation on this year's sessions, we found that we have 57% male, 41% female for our 4 to 6 week sessions. When you include the family groups into that, it averages out about 50-50 male and female. And we're actually quite happy with that gender split. I think that's quite unusual for a charity organisation that offer activities for health and wellbeing, that they're actually appealing almost equally to men and women. We feel that's one of our strengths. Also with the age group, we've got about 49% under 44 years of age and 51% over 44 years of age. So again, we're appealing to a wide age range. And if you add in our family groups and our walking groups, we're actually attracting people from age 0 up to age about 94 as our oldest participants. So we're spanning across genders and age ranges, and we're quite happy with that. The WIMD stands for Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation. And we've based this on postcode data that we collect from our participants. So from this, we found that actually 48% come from the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation 1 to 5, which is the most deprived areas in Wales, and 52% from the least deprived. Of course, we don't discriminate against where you come from. If you're suffering and you want some help and you've been referred, it can be from any deprivation level here in Wales. So, but again, we did some analysis on our referrals, and we found that 58% of our participants referred, and the majority of those for mental or physical health conditions that they feel can benefit through being part of Active Woods programme. So can we have the next slide, please? So what we were really interested in looking at this year was, can these activities help improve wellbeing? How we measure wellbeing is another session for this, but we're not going to go into that now. What we used to measure wellbeing for our participants was the Long Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, which is a validated method used by the NHS. It's used across the world, and it's based on 14 different points and statements that are used to measure wellbeing on a 1 to 5 point scale. What we did with our participants, we asked all of our participants to fill in a questionnaire at the beginning of the session, so before they'd started any sessions with us, and then at the end of the session, so that we could have a pre and post comparison for wellbeing. What we found through this, I'll just explain a little bit about how the Warwick Edinburgh works. So the 14 statements are all graded by points. So you could have the lowest well-being would be 14 points, 1 point for each, and the highest well-being would be 70 points. The average for the UK is about 51 out of interest. So 51 is the average well-being for the Warwick Edinburgh. What we found with our participants is that 71% of the participants who completed both the pre and post, so everything else was taken out, showed an increase in their well-being, and a significant number of those showed a really high level, so over 6 points, which is considered a meaningful change in well-being. And the bottom purple box tells us the mean score. So that's the average score of all the participants have filled in the questionnaire. At the beginning was about 45. I'm thinking where it is. And at the end was 53. So 45 would be well below the average well-being for the UK. 53 is just slightly above. So we were really pleased with those results, and we feel that if we go on to the next slide, we feel that what we're doing is looking at different measures. So yes, being in nature, really, really important, but what other things are improving people's well-being? So we wanted to find out through using the NHS 5 Ways to Wellbeing as a model. And we also use this as a model for actually what activities we run, but also a model for how do we evaluate those activities. So the 5 Ways to Wellbeing for the NHS are learn, take notice, connect, be active and give. So we asked our participants questions on all of these different aspects, and we were really pleased with the results. Again, 90% felt they had learnt new skills and 86% had learnt new knowledge. 75% felt they were more connected to their local green spaces, and 91% said they'd made more friends and felt more connected to the local community. So I think we're kind of seeing that there's a kind of whole host of things connected to well-being that this is providing. Again, active, 66% felt that being part of Active Woods led them to do more physical activity. We also used a validated method to measure physical activity called the International Physical Activity Questionnaire, but I won't go into that now. But that was slightly less, so about 56% we found actually increased, and it was mainly the people that led quite sedentary lifestyles and didn't do a lot of physical activity that benefited from those things. And of course, give back. Part of what we do at Active Woods is try and encourage the people to actively support their woodlands by doing litter picks, clearing invasive species, understanding woodland management, and understanding how they contribute to increasing the access for all of the different people in their community to these woodlands. And we're really kind of passionate about that. And I think that's something that we can kind of give out the longevity to what we do through contributing back to the community. So 68% felt they contributed to making their green space better. The other way we collect data, of course, isn't just through facts and figures, but we do lots of interviews with people. So I'm at the moment collecting case studies of our participants, but we ask a lot of open-ended questions. And the way I evaluate all the open-ended questions is read every single one of them. And I code all of these for different references, but I don't want to go into that now. I just want to read this one because I thought this was really nice from a participant in East Port Talbot. Being part of Active Woods has improved my well-being and given a new focus to my life. Stress levels, blood pressure and self-worth have all improved. I've been introduced to the local area, which I didn't know existed, and I've been introduced to friends and family. I've introduced friends and family to these areas also. I've learnt new skills and been involved in a variety of activities from forest connections, tree identification, willow and woodworking, and I've also made a new circle of like-minded friends. So we just love that quote. I just thought that was just a lovely quote, just summing up the whole host of things that are involved in being outdoors, being with people, being in nature, and doing and producing something together. So we just wanted to highlight quickly what we did as a response to COVID-19. Of course, all of our activities are based with bringing people together in a social way outside in the woodlands. So it was a big challenge for us to adapt to a different way of working. But I think the staff adapted absolutely amazingly. Everyone's taken on new challenges through this. The first thing we did, of course, is to launch a questionnaire with all our participants. And we're really aware through that questionnaire that some people didn't have online connectivity. So we did this questionnaire both online and over the telephone with all our participants. We collected 120 results, and through that guided how we were going to continue delivering through the COVID lockdown. And what we decided to do was, and what was desired by our participants was some telephone nature chat, so that they can continue talking about nature, talking about their gardens. If they only had their windowsill because they were shielding, there was someone to talk to about what they might find on that windowsill, what butterflies might be landing on the flowers, all sorts of things. And that just creates a link to our participants, so we can carry on giving them social support through this period. The other thing we did was launch online national sessions and local sessions on Zoom, so that we can continue delivering all of the things we delivered, but with an online facility. So the local Zoom sessions are nice because they kind of provide an opportunity for our existing participants to meet together again in an online format. So the last slide is our areas of focus. And no evaluation would be any good if we didn't use it to direct our focus for the following year. So what we're focusing on next year, and again, we do a lot of consultation with different referral organisations throughout the year as well. Attendance and retaining attendance is something that's going to be really key to us. If we want to expand, we need to understand people more, and we need to understand why people might not want to start coming to our services in the first place. What are the barriers to those for people attending our sessions? And they're, mainly they're social and anxiety issues that we need to then put things in place to help support people to attend and continue attending through the sessions that we offer. Physical health is something we'd like to focus more on. How can we build more physical health activities by stealth, and also practically through our sessions. Adult family wellbeing. I didn't talk about the adult family evaluation here, but we noticed that the wellbeing didn't increase as much for the adult groups as it did for the family adult groups as it did for the adult groups without the families there. And that's something we want to look into to make sure that we're enabling our adults to get the benefit of this, even with the children around. And the other thing that we mainly get comments about, if we ask what could we improve on, is the weather. Well, how can we improve the weather in Wales? I mean, it's wonderful, as we know, that's why we're so green. But what we can do, we can't change the weather. We can create shelters, improve access, weatherproofing, all of those kind of things that would help support people to feel more comfortable when they're outdoors, and use the outdoors all through the year. The other thing we want to focus on is improving woodlands. Again, we touched upon how we encourage the value of woodlands to people and that they can continue that through their communities. We want to work on how we can do that more, how we can expand that. And I think that will benefit everyone in the future. And again, about what Robert was saying about prevention as well as cure, this could be a long-term strategy for Wales to cover all of those things. And we hope that by strengthening the connection between the environment and the health sector, that we can have happier and healthier woodlands and happier and healthier people. And thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Natasha. Absolutely fascinating. So we have inevitably, I suppose, run over a little bit because far too many interesting things for our panelists to relate in such a short period of time. But I think we've got a few minutes. I mean, it really is just a few minutes. It's sort of 5 minutes. So at 23 minutes past 1, Sabine Soosten is going to lead us in a mindfulness session on the subject of the tree, which I think is absolutely essential. So that'll take 5 minutes. So we've basically got 5 minutes to have a very quick discussion on the slide, which is on the screen now. So, this is the question. It's kind of at the nub of what we've been talking about with respect to the COVID pandemic and how to dig ourselves out of here and how to support a green recovery. So the question, if I say to all of you on the panel, you've got a minute to make 2 or 3 points about this question, would that suit you? So it would be, so the question is, how can nature and health help to support a more just society as part of the green recovery? Jennifer, can I throw that one at you first?
Yes, absolutely. I guess for me, the important thing there is that what we're going to have to face coming out of COVID is the economic impact. That's going to be the biggest contributor. And as we already know, prior to going into COVID, Marmot report came out 10 years on and showed that we were already had lost a decade in terms of the health inequalities agenda. So for me, it's really an opportunity not only to ensure that we protect, maintain and improve our green spaces, but to really think about how we use the assets that we have in Wales, of which we are blessed, I have to say. We're absolutely blessed in terms of the variety of green spaces. How can we use that in a positive way to drive up the economy? So it's really about a green economy. And what does that look like? Whether that is, green energy, whether it's about startups that use the natural environment, tourism, agriculture, there's a whole range of, but I think if I'm really honest, rather than it become a side issue which is competing with other things, the issue will be about the economy, in my view, and therefore how do we make our green spaces a really core part of that.
Rod, would you like to have a go at that one?
Oh, yes, or no, as the case may be. I would hope that post-COVID, we would realise that all our resources need to be focused on people and not on objects, that we don't really need to divert much of our income to material things, that actually what gives us the quality of life is relationships. And I think that's really all I want to say. I'm not 100% confident that we have learnt the lessons. When people talk about getting the economy going, my fear is that they mean people spend more on things they don't want so that shareholders and directors can make big profits, and that's really not. We shouldn't be talking about getting the economy going. We should be talking about repairing and enhancing society.
Fascinating. I think that's great. That's a very good point. Well made. Ed, would you like to have a go at that one?
Yeah. So looking at the mountain image, I think some people are standing on the summit and they're saying, wow, this is amazing. Look at the opportunities. And some people are standing at the bottom of the ridgeline and they literally can't take another step. They're absolutely finished with it. And this is just the worst thing ever. And I think we need a rope between the two, or we need, in Active Woods, we need to make some nettle cordage, a really long bit of nettle cordage between those on the summit and those struggling down at the bottom. And we need to be making sure there's a dialogue, pulling up, pulling down, pulling up, pulling down, and getting to somewhere we need to be together. And that's the only way it can work.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think it's great. Again, Natasha, can I invite you to throw your a minute's worth in?
You can. Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with Ed, really. I think it's about supporting people and providing those support mechanisms for people to be able to get up that ladder to the top of the mountain. But actually, I'd like to sort of highlight the role that secondary schools could play in this, and education for young people. I think young people are interested in the environment. I think Greta Thunberg has proved that. I think we need to work much more with secondary schools. I think primary schools are doing pretty well with the forest school movement. It kind of all stops in secondary schools. I really think that we could, have a whole host of very talented young people in secondary schools that could help to build this movement more in the future. So I would say, yes, let's work with and supporting people, but let's work with those really talented people in secondary schools to just get a new pipeline up and running to help protect people and the environment.
Great. I think we're probably going to, it's such a shame that the Q&A is going to be curtailed like this. We've had some really interesting questions from members of the public. Rod, how is WSC funded? How involved in area statements is everyone? How relevant do you think area statements can be in linking health and well-being and nature? What's the cost benefit? Can be a greater green space interaction. And then rather excellent question here, how can we get health and well-being professionals running Welsh Government departments instead of economists? There's a question. To lead us in our mindfulness moment, because I recognise that time is running out. Brilliant. Here she is.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
I think good. I think we need to sort of find ways to relax after all this information we've had, and wonderful information. So I invite you to join me in a very short mindful meditation. I've named it The Tree, and the photo you can see is one of our oak trees here at the Woodland Skills Centre. Okay, make yourself comfortable, and you can do it standing or sitting down, whatever is most comfortable for yourself. Bring to mind picture of a tree, or look at the picture on the screen. Now this is a wide open, spacious awareness meditation, and imagine a tree with its three parts. You have the boughs, the branches, the leaves, then the trunk and the roots. And if we sort of concentrate on or focus, bring our awareness to the boughs of the tree, that's where all the life is, the busyness, the birds, the insects, the squirrels, the rain falling on the leaves, the wind rustling through the leaves. This is where all the life is, and we can compare that to our minds, where all the busyness is, all the life takes place. Our mind is busy, like the life in the tree canopy. So bring your awareness to all that life in the tree, and as the tree reaches up his boughs to the sky, embracing all the life, the busyness therein. So we embrace our life, our busyness, our feelings at the moment. What are your thoughts, your sensations? What's going on in your mind? Now we bring our focus to the trunk of the tree. So the trunk of the tree gives the tree stability, support, is strong. And we're bringing our focus to our breath, our breathing. That's what sustains us, supports us in our life. And as you focus on your breath, on your in-breath and your out-breath, where do you feel it? In your chest, in your tummy, your abdomen. Just spend some time just focusing on your in-breath and your out-breath, just as it is natural for you. Don't force it, just in a natural way. And the breath supports us and is always there with us. And then we're moving down to the roots of the tree. Roots reaching out, giving the tree stability in a wide space. And again, our breath, reaching out to every part in our body, right to our toes and our fingers, keeping us stable. Spend a few minutes just focusing on your breath, on your awareness. And then prepare yourself to be ready for whatever life has waiting for you. And if you had your eyes closed, very slowly open them and take in your surroundings. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a good day.
Everyone on the panel for contributing your ideas. And if anybody wants to get in touch with anyone, there are...
I'm sorry, I pressed stop. I thought you
that's okay.
finished.
Don't worry, I can share the view.